Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John. Thank you for being here. We've got a pretty dark topic today, so let's get right to it. What's the most horrific act committed by someone that you know personally? Not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Guy I went to school with was real calm, very smart, and everyone loved him. He was a gentle person from what I remember. He had lost his mom a couple years before this. She was a nurse, and they found her dead in a hospital room during her shift, unknown causes. Our senior year of high school, dude is a championship wrestler, dominating his grades and just doing good. He lived with his dad, who was a police officer for years and years. At lunch one day, he left school and came back. Everything was normal and the day was finished out. His dad did not show up for work that evening, and the police department sent someone to go knock on his door. They found the house ransacked and his dad lying in bed with a single gunshot wound to the head, deceased. Later that night, they called my grandmother in for questioning because she cleaned their house once a week. Not much later than that, the guy I went to school with broke down and confessed that he had come home on lunch to ask for money, and he and his dad got in an argument. His dad laid down like normal for a shift, and he took his dad's service pistol and shot him. And after realizing what he'd done, he'd freaked out and turned the house upside down to make it look like a robbery. Then went and finished the day at school to try and make it seem like he had no clue what had happened. Shocked everyone. When we were in school, this boy from our year, we were 13 years old or so at the time, was with his two older brothers and kidnapped a man. The man was dating their sister, and at the time, people were very protective if you dated someone's sister. They took him to a petrol station and covered him in petrol. They then took him to a forest and burnt him alive. All three brothers went to prison, but since they were minors, I don't think they got out that many years. When I was 21 to 22, I bumped into the guy from my year in a takeaway, and he tells me he's working at the local supermarket. A few months later, I end up working in that same supermarket, and he goes to me, "Anyone messes with you, let me know." I'm thinking, nah, I don't want them dead in a forest. Her 2-year-old daughter drowned under suspicious circumstances. Nothing could be proved. About 3 years or so later, she had another kid, also drowned under suspicious circumstances. She was investigated but found nothing, attributed to shitty coincidence. A couple more years later, she had a third kid with her man. Father came home early to find that she wasn't in the house, but his son was left alone in the bathtub. He was dead by that point. She got slapped with 3 murder charges and life. It's just a shame that it was 3 kids too late. Just absolutely heartbreaking for that father, and just terrible, horrible. My father beat the shit out of my mother and myself when I was a toddler. I have an uneven skull because of it. Until I found out, I thought it was a birth defect. I didn't find this out from my mother until I was an adult, when I had to take him to court because he had opened numerous credit cards with my social security number when I was a kid and had tanked my credit by the time I was 18. My mother tried to kill my father when I was a toddler by taping up the windows in our apartment. She turned on the gas at the stove, took me, and left. She knew my dad would light a cigarette upon returning home. She was banking on it. Luckily, my dad was able to smell the gas leaking under the door. I only met him once as a kid, but my granddad's brother-in-law. He approached me and my mom in a cafe. I was 8 and tried starting normal conversational small talk. My mom panicked and asked him what the hell he was doing out of prison. He brushed her question off and he knelt down to talk to me, which made my mom pick me up, sling me over her shoulder, and run back to the car. I just remember being so scared by her sudden moves, I quietly burst into tears in the car, and we drove halfway home. Mom then stopped in a supermarket car park, got in the back, unbuckled me, and we cuddled in the back for what felt like days, most likely an hour tops, whilst we both cried. I had no clue what was happening, but Mom calmed me down and she kept saying, "You're safe, I love you," over and over. I found out years later, he slit my granddad's sister, his wife's, throat and brutally beat her to death, hence my mom's fear. I didn't know him, but I do now. 30-year-old meth head went on an hour-long rampage in his car, driving along the wrong side of the highways of my town, attempting to crash head-on with other road users. He was unsuccessful until he crashed head-on with my 17-year-old brother. The meth head was doing an estimated 140 kilometers per hour, and my brother was doing 110, the speed limit. He just got sentenced to 10 years in jail yesterday, and my brother now has lifelong injuries from the crash. Weirdest part of it all is that the media and news reports of the accident were either silenced or made to be removed, and we don't know why. A friend was brutally murdered a few years back. Due to my relationship with him and having met his assailant a few times, I cooperated with investigators. I was privy to details not released to the press or initial public records. They didn't just stab him to death, he was tortured. Then they took cash advances at his bank's ATM to go on a drug spree, drove his beloved Mustang all over, then partied in his house for a few days. The victim was gay, and their murderer immediately tried to pin his disappearance on a soldier he was seeing. Unfortunately, the stench of decay prompted police to get a search warrant. MFer had the receipt in his pocket for the container he'd bought for my friend's body. I still can't walk down a storage solutions aisle. All I can think about is what size bin would accommodate someone my friend's size. Dude had a rap sheet and a public defender. Ended up doing a plea deal. Will be locked up for at least a few decades with good behavior. He should never even hope of seeing the light of day after he butchered someone like an animal, then hung out in his next room like it was nothing. My brother robbed a pizza guy. Twice. He called for a pizza in a park, and when the pizza man arrived, he pulled a knife on him. High on Xanax, I assume he went to sleep, woke up thinking it was a dream and said, "Wow, that was a great idea, I better try it tonight." So he did the exact same thing, and the pizza guy came and hit him with a golf club. My brother absolutely deserved it. Pizza delivery guys are like holy saints of the modern world and shouldn't be touched or messed with. Well, hopefully that golf club to the head could help turn your brother's life around, because he's heading down a pretty dark path. My best friend's uncle, Dad's brother, killed her mom. He was always around, the fun jokester uncle, creeped in the house and stabbed his brother's wife 16 times out of the blue one day as she was doing laundry in her basement. I grew up with this family. It was shocking and traumatizing, even though it wasn't my own family. My best friend and I spent our teen years eating lunch at her mom's grave most days because the cemetery was a few blocks from our school. A friend in college, grad student while I was undergrad, back in the early 2000s, suffered from schizophrenia, but was well controlled on meds. Long story short, his student insurance stopped covering his meds and he was unable to get to see a psyche before he ran out. Out of pocket was nearly $1,000 a month. He tried rationing meds but declined rapidly, and he and his mom spent 3 days frantically trying to find an inpatient bed in a psych unit that could take him. I know that he was very worried that he would hurt somebody and could feel himself slipping away. On the 4th day, he shot and killed his pregnant wife. He then tried to kill himself, but succeeded only in shooting off his own lower jaw. Thing is that when his head was right, he was such a good guy, and he was so excited to be a dad. It was all he talked about some days. That, and he loved his wife like crazy. Always talked about how out of his league she was and how lucky he was. As far as I know, he's still in jail, still has no mandible, and now that he's back on meds, is fully cognizant of what he's done. I cannot imagine his grief and guilt. I guess instead of looking for a hospital bed, he should have just gotten himself arrested. Our US mental health system, if you could even call it that, is a very, very bad joke. My neighbors left their dogs locked in their apartment while going on vacation. Poor dogs died of starvation. We all thought they might have taken them along. When it began to smell terrible, we called the cops. They forced their way in and found out what had happened. The cops tried reaching out to the owners, but it turned out they were in another country. They talked on the phone, and a relative of theirs living nearby came to talk to the police. Their arguments were, "How can you break into our house?" And "We can do whatever we want with our dogs." I don't know what happened next. Also, that apartment as a whole was toxic, and I'm happy I moved out last month. This incident is from late 2019. Edit. English is my second language. My sister's friend's mom, her boyfriend, and the mom's cousin all killed my sister's friend in such a horrific way. They strangled her, sexually assaulted her, dismembered her, and burned her body in the bathroom tub, all on the girl's 10th birthday. Weeks before this happened, the mom and the little girl came to my sister's 10th birthday party and met our whole family. We had pictures of them on Facebook, and my sister even almost stayed over for the night. horrible. Our local news is currently showing live videos of the trial for the 3 that murdered her. I cannot watch it, and I do not want my sister watching it because she is still too young to know what happened to her friend. I've been trying to protect her and make sure that she doesn't find out more than what we've told, which is that she has passed away. Hearing it on our local news literally breaks my heart. Sometimes it almost seems like a trial is too good for some people. I'm not going to say anything worse, but just horrible. Allegedly, a former coworker of mine killed her mentally disabled live-in sister and their 2 dogs by locking them in a running car that was inside of their closed garage. She then allegedly forged a suicide note to look like the sister committed suicide. I must say that I have a very hard time believing the accusation. This woman definitely didn't like that she had to care for her sister for her entire life, but she loved those dogs. There's no way she'd have killed the dogs. I never did hear how the case ended, moved on to a different job before everything was resolved. Less horrible, I know a guy who used to fence forgeries of paintings in order to pay for his drug habit. Ended up going to prison for several years. 8? I'm not sure about that number. Now he's a registered felon and can't vote. Great guy though. Completely reformed, sober, and he has a really positive outlook on life. Absolute proof that people can change. My former high school band director suddenly didn't show up to school. Plus it was on a Friday night game. I was scared that he got into some freak accident since he never misses. A few days later, it was announced he resigned after rumors of him sending sexual text messages. There was another incident several years before where he made sexual contact with a student taking lessons, and he also supposedly tried giving her alcohol. It was hard to believe how someone you've respected for so long has this type of history. It makes you wonder how someone can do this and have it hidden for so long. Looking back, it was obvious the greater attention to female students. I was one of only 8 to 9 males who got leadership roles in marching band compared to 30 plus females. He originally was given 2 sentences for 40 years in prison, but it got reduced to 1 year plus 5 years of probation. A friend of mine got behind the wheel of his Hellcat with a new guy from work. Driving 90 miles an hour on the wrong side of the road, my friend asked the new guy, "Oh, what's wrong, you scared?" That was the last thing he said, as he slammed head-on into another car, killing himself and an elementary school teacher on her way home. New guy survived. That's how I know what happened in the car, as best as he could remember it anyway. This happened about 8 years ago. I haven't had time to process my anger and confusion and sadness over that event. I can't say I've never DUI'd. I hardly ever drink anymore, but when I do, I think about my friend and make arrangements, or I don't go out. One day while we were in school, an acquaintance's father killed their mother and then himself and set their house on fire. Their father was somewhat abusive and their mother was thinking of leaving him. It completely changed the acquaintance. He was only 13, but had to basically grow up and mature overnight. He and his siblings had to move in with their grandmother with basically nothing but the clothes on their back. He was able to get a driver's license at 13 because their grandma couldn't drive, so he could help. Somehow, against all odds, he and his siblings are all perfectly normal people.